The M16 rifle. In the humid jungles of Vietnam, American soldiers carried a weapon that had been sold to them as the future of warfare. Lightweight, futuristic, made of plastic and aluminum instead of wood and steel, it looked like something out of a science fiction film. But for thousands of young men fighting in the dense undergrowth of Southeast Asia, this weapon of the future would become a symbol of betrayal, jamming at the worst possible moments and turning firefights into death traps. This is the story of how the M16 went from revolutionary design to the most notorious rifle in American military history. The birth of a revolutionary design. The story of the M16 begins with Eugene Stoner, a self-taught engineer working for the Armalite Corporation in the 1950s. Stoner had a radical vision for what a modern combat rifle should be. Rather than following the traditional path of wood stocks and heavy steel components, Stoner designed his AR-15 rifle using aircraft-grade aluminum and synthetic materials, drastically reducing the weapon's weight compared to the standard-issue M14 rifles of the era. The AR-15 fired a small, high-velocity 5.56 by 45 mm cartridge, a significant departure from the heavier 7.62 by 51 mm round used by NATO forces at the time. This smaller round meant soldiers could carry far more ammunition for the same weight, a crucial advantage for infantry who might need to sustain fire for extended periods. The AR-15's design also incorporated a direct impingement gas system, where propellant gases were channeled directly back into the bolt carrier group to cycle the action, eliminating the need for a separate piston system found in most other rifles of the period. This made the weapon lighter and simpler to manufacture, but it also meant that combustion residue would be blown directly into the rifle's internal mechanism with every single shot fired, a design choice that would later prove catastrophic under the wrong conditions. Initially, the United States military showed little interest in Stoner's creation, remaining committed to the M14 and its full-power cartridge. However, as American involvement in Vietnam escalated throughout the early 1960s, the shortcomings of the M14 became increasingly apparent. The rifle was long, heavy, and difficult to control on fully automatic fire, particularly for smaller-statured South Vietnamese Allied soldiers. General Curtis LeMay of the Air Force had already taken a liking to the AR-15 for use by security personnel, and after a series of trials, the Department of Defense began adopting the rifle for limited use in 1962. By 1964, the U.S. Army had officially adopted a modified version of the rifle under the designation M16. A weapon rushed to war. The Army's version of the AR-15 differed from Stoner's original design in ways that would prove disastrous. Colt, which had purchased the manufacturing rights from Armalite, marketed the M16 as virtually maintenance-free, a claim that led to a fateful decision. Cleaning kits and cleaning rods were not issued to troops carrying the weapon into combat. Soldiers were told the rifle would essentially clean itself. This assumption would soon be tested in the worst possible environment on Earth, the hot, humid, and dust-choked jungles of Vietnam. Compounding this error was a change made to the ammunition itself. Stoner's original design had been tested extensively using IMR, or improved military rifle powder, a propellant that burned relatively cleanly. However, when the Army began mass-producing ammunition for the M16, they switched to a different propellant known as WC-846 ball powder, primarily because it was already being manufactured in large quantities for other weapon systems and was significantly cheaper to produce. Unfortunately, this ball powder burned dirtier and left considerably more fouling residue inside the rifle's action than the powder the weapon had been originally designed and tested around. Given that the direct impingement system channeled combustion gases straight back into the rifle's internal mechanism, this residue accumulated rapidly with every round fired, gumming up the bolt carrier group until the weapon could no longer cycle properly.
The result was a rifle that jammed with alarming frequency, often at the exact moment a soldier needed it most. Spent cartridge casings would fail to eject and become lodged in the chamber, a malfunction so common among troops that it earned a grimly informal nickname among the men who suffered through it. Soldiers would find themselves in the middle of an ambush, pulling the trigger only to hear a dull click, forced to use a cleaning rod, a knife, or anything else on hand to manually pry a stuck casing free while under enemy fire. Letters home from soldiers in the field painted a damning picture, describing rifles that failed during firefights and directly resulted in the deaths of fellow soldiers. Some units reported malfunction rates as high as 1 in every 4 rounds fired under combat conditions. Congress steps in. By 1967, reports of the M16's failures had become so widespread and so alarming that the United States House of Representatives launched a formal investigation into the weapon under the direction of Congressman Richard Eichord. The Eichord Committee's findings were damning. Investigators concluded that the switch to ball powder had never been properly tested for compatibility with the original design specifications, and that the decision to withhold cleaning equipment from frontline troops had been made without adequate understanding of the conditions soldiers would actually face in Vietnam. The report placed significant blame on the Army's Ordnance Corps and on Colt for failing to communicate the critical maintenance needs of the weapon to the men who depended on it for their lives. In response to mounting pressure, engineers introduced a series of modifications intended to solve the rifle's chronic reliability problems. The most significant of these was the addition of a chrome-lined chamber and bore, which helped resist corrosion and made the weapon considerably easier to clean and less prone to residue buildup. A forward assist mechanism was also added, allowing soldiers to manually push the bolt fully into battery if fouling prevented it from closing on its own. This updated model was designated the M16A1, and cleaning kits were finally issued as standard equipment alongside it. Soldiers were also given proper training and clear instructions on how frequently the weapon needed to be cleaned, something that had been catastrophically absent in the rifle's earliest years of deployment. A reputation that would not die. Even after these fixes were implemented, the M16's early reputation for unreliability proved difficult to shake among the men who had already lived through its failures. Many Vietnam veterans continued to distrust the weapon for the remainder of their service, some going so far as to seek out captured enemy AK-47 rifles, valuing their legendary reliability under harsh jungle conditions over the finicky M16 they had been issued. This created a strange irony of the war, where American soldiers, backed by the industrial might of the most powerful military on Earth, sometimes found themselves envying the crude but dependable rifle carried by their adversaries. Despite its troubled beginning, the improved M16A1 and its later variants would go on to become one of the most widely used rifle platforms in modern military history. The basic AR-15 pattern that Eugene Stoner pioneered would eventually spawn an enormous family of weapons, from the M4 carbine used by American forces today to countless civilian sporting rifles manufactured around the world. The lightweight construction and small-caliber high-velocity cartridge that once seemed so radical became the standard that most modern military rifles would eventually follow, including those of nations that had once dismissed the concept entirely. Legacy of a flawed beginning. The story of the M16 in Vietnam remains one of the most sobering cautionary tales in the history of military procurement, a reminder that even the most innovative design can become deadly when manufacturing shortcuts and bureaucratic assumptions are allowed to override the hard lessons of combat testing. The rifle that was supposed to represent the future of American firepower instead became, for a brief and bitter period, a liability that cost soldiers their lives in the very jungles it was meant to help them survive. It would take congressional investigation, engineering redesign, and no small amount of bloodshed before the M16 finally earned the trust of the men who carried it. A trust that soldiers today, carrying its modern descendants, now take largely for granted.